In a sense, to use the computer metaphor, habit 1 is the awareness you are the programmer. Habit 2 is where you write the program. Habit 3 is where you run it. You execute around it. The third habit is put first things first. I'm going to try to teach an entirely new paradigm in the field of time management. Essentially, it is a paradigm or a way of thinking which focuses on relationships rather than schedules. The traditional paradigm in the field of time management has always dealt with time, scheduling, control, efficiency, doing more things faster. The paradigm is one focused upon efficiency and control. It's called time management. So you manage your time. The clock is the symbol of it. It drives us toward efficiency. Have you ever tried to be efficient with a loved one on a tough issue? Say with your spouse, how did it go? Have you ever tried to be efficient with, say, a difficult teenage situation? How did it go? You see, right off the bat, you and I know how foolish it is. But look at the paradigm that drives it. So what do? When it doesn't work, what do? We try to do it better, more efficiently. We try to be nicer. We try to be more positive. But the underlying paradigm, which is not questioned, of control and efficiency, and that we're right and the other is wrong, turns people into a thing. The paradigm I'm trying to teach today is one of a compass, based upon the sense of focusing upon the first things in our lives. And they are always relationships. The older one becomes, and the wider and deeper the perspective of a person's life is, the more relationships become the supreme thing. And the essence of all effectiveness basically deals with people, with relationships. But these are governed by a moral sense of principles, of what is right and what is wrong, and of integrity around those. I'm asking for sufficient openness and humility to just get into this pair of glasses, this frame of reference, this new paradigm, this new map, based upon relationships, not schedules, based upon principles, not values, based upon leadership first, then management, based upon a compass, and then a clock. Let me show you a practical way of doing this. Would everyone write down on your paper, what to you are the first things? What are the first things to you? What are the most supremely important things of your life? Things speaking in a generic sense, people, relationships, family, health, integrity. What are the first things? Just list 5 or 6. Now prioritize them. This is the toughest part of the thinking process, the prioritization. What would you say would be number 1, then number 2, then 3, 4, 5, and so forth? If you don't prioritize them, have your spouse prioritize them for you. Now, I want you to answer these 2 questions. I want you to think of one activity that you absolutely know that if you did it superbly well and consistently would produce marvelous results in your personal life. Then do the same thing for your professional or work life. One activity that you absolutely know that if you did it superbly well and consistently would produce marvelous results. In other words, help to secure those first things you've identified. One activity under your personal, one activity under your work or professional life. Okay, now you have all written down what the first things are to you. And you also have written down what is one activity in both your personal and your professional life that you know, if you did it superbly well, that it would have marvelous results. Okay, now let's get into the heart of the application of this paradigm, which focuses upon relationships and principles rather than things, schedules, efficiency, and control. I need a volunteer. How would you like to consider that? Okay. You'd come up here, please. Your name is?
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth? Thank you. Good to see you. Elizabeth, you've got, oh, you hold this. Very, very busy life, right?
I do.
You have a work life?
I do.
Family life as well?
Mm-hmm.
Children?
Not yet.
Not yet. What's the nature of your work assignment?
Consulting.
Consulting. Do you have a part of a firm, a consulting firm?
Yes, I do. I direct an international firm.
An international firm. Mm-hmm. So you really are interfacing with all kinds of people in the firm and outside the firm.
That's right.
Do you also do direct work with the clients yourself?
That's right.
And you have a number of associates you work with
Mm-hmm.
all around this country and throughout the world?
Mm-hmm.
Starting?
Yes.
Kind of like us.
That's right.
You want a rich personal life and a rich family life and also community and so forth. Do you ever feel like you get bogged down in the thick of thin things?
Yes.
Do you ever feel like your life is kind of out of balance, out of whack?
It can be.
Do you ever feel like you're in the pounding surf?
Mm-hmm.
You know, where you just have one big wave after another knock you down, you stagger back, and then here comes another wave, and another one knocks you down to where it just kind of beats you up?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that might be analogous to all these little, small things that tend to fill our life. And that just little by little, they just accumulate. Now, your job, you can't go above this, is to get all those large rocks in the jar. Good luck. I'll describe each of the rocks as she puts them in. What's that one called?
Q2. Planning, preparation.
Right. Planning, preparation, prevention, and empowerment. Mm-hmm. Q2. That which is not urgent but important.
Right. Am I picking these up in any order?
Any way you want. You want to get them all in there because they're all important.
Can I move the little rocks?
Well, you have the little rocks as they are now, but you can't go above this.
Okay. Can I put this down?
Sure. Okay, the next rock she's putting in there is called relationships and family. She's trying to make it so she can get them all in there on the assumption that by moving the other ones around, Makes more space. You didn't look at that third rock you put in there. That's employment, some key employment issue, and then you put major projects here. I can't get it above there.
I haven't worked it yet.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair.
It's not going to work.
That's called Service Community Church. Do you ever feel like this?
Yes.
How many feel like this?
Am I still going?
Yeah, you can. Try to get them in there. You're a hands-on person.
I am. Well. It's not very flat.
She just put down the sharpen the saw. How many frequently do that? I just don't have time today to sharpen the saw. You ever been too busy driving to take time to get gas?
This is important.
Vacation. Vacation's important to her. By moving the little things around, you might squeeze in one more of those big major things.
Does that count?
It's almost. Wow, it's good. You know, if it doesn't fit, force it.
Do I have to really put all of these in here?
Well, no. You can neglect a big opportunity if you want.
No.
Here's something that's called urgent and important. It's a quadrant 1 thing that is blindsiding you, that it's your biggest client, that if you don't get back to that client now, you've given up your vacation. And you have no special block of time just for yourself.
No.
You have no young children. I'll tell you what you can do if you want to.
What's that?
You can take a whole different approach. You have a totally fresh bowl. You can work out of a different paradigm altogether. You can do anything you want.
So I can use that bucket. That's what you're
Anything,
saying?
yeah.
Well, then I'd rather put these in the bottom. And then pour the little pebbles on top. Vacation.
Okay, she has sharpening the saw, planning, preparation,
Spouse.
spouse,
Vacation.
employment,
Big opportunity.
big opportunity,
Important and urgent. Block of time. Community. Church. Those young children keep looking at me. Glad my husband's not here. No, I dump these in there.
okay? You got all the important things in first, right?
That's right.
That's great. What did you learn?
I learned if I have an opportunity to do all the things that are important first and block out when I have the fullest amount available, and then all the little things will fill in the important things.
Even if this were higher with the green rocks, you may neglect some of those, see?
Mm-hmm.
But so what?
Those are just fillers.
They're fillers, and they're not important. These things you've decided are the most important things. Did you also notice anything else about each of these things? A common characteristic of each of the big rocks. What have they to do with, or who?
With myself.
Self,
Some had to do with others. They all
with others.
affected
All
others.
had to do with relationships and different roles that you've got. So what if you were to shift to a paradigm of deciding, first of all, what your whole life is about, so that you have a philosophical basis on which to make all of the decisions about what are the big rocks, the middle-sized, small rocks, and so forth. Put the big rocks in very first, the most important things, then the other ones accordingly. And to get out of daily planning altogether, because if you're in the daily planning, what's already happened?
The little rocks are already filling out my day.
Absolutely, and all you're doing now is prioritizing crises. And you have a big rock like this, like a major project, just like you tried to do. There's just no way you can fit that in. So what if you had the philosophy of relationships rather than schedules, and to organize your whole life around relationships, around the roles that you have with yourself and with other people first? Well, that's the whole idea. Thank you very much. Let's hear it for Elizabeth. The key words to understand are importance and urgency. Importance and urgency. Importance basically comes from within you. Importance is your value system, hopefully based upon principles. Importance is your mission, your central strategy to accomplish those high priority goals and plans to implement that strategy. Urgent comes from the environment. It presses upon you. It's proximate. It's right in front of you. It's often very popular. It could be deep into a social value system. You have to decide what is truly important. That's why I asked you. Notice the question. What are the most important things to you? And then, what are the single activities that you know without any question, by doing those consistently, superbly well, would accomplish marvelous results? See, you've identified what's important. We call this a time management matrix. There are 4 quadrants. Now, quadrant 1, you'll notice, is both urgent and important. It's like that important client that is contacting Elizabeth in her international consulting business. But it's not at a convenient time. But it's a pressing need on the part of that client. Quadrant 1. She needs to attend to it. It's important. It's also urgent. Quadrant 1 is where you tend to move toward crisis, toward problems, If you're not in that meeting, you'll have a problem. So it's a quadrant 1. You have to be in that meeting. So it's either a present problem or a problem in the making if you neglect it. Quadrant 2 is not urgent, but it is important. Prevention, preparation, planning, relationship building, empowerment, sharpening the saw, self-development, setting up mission statements. Quadrant 2 is the leadership quadrant. Quadrant 3 is not important, but it is urgent. Those things that are pressing, sometimes even popular, proximate, right in front of you, but not important. And 4 is neither urgent nor important. That would be symbolized by these small rocks, these green pebbles. All right, now, look at your paper. Look at your answers to those 2 questions. What quadrant were those answers in? What would you say? One activity you know would produce marvelous results. Yes, sir. What did you have down? What quadrant? Quadrant 2. Now, why isn't it 1? Because you're not now doing it. It's not urgent. The low urgency need. When we're driven by the urgent, when we are addicted to the urgent, it drives us into what quadrants? 1 and 3. In fact, you examine most executive agendas against the 4 quadrants, and you'll find almost all of them are 1 and 3. 2 is usually called other business. What happens then to 2? It gets pushed aside. 2 represents the big rocks. They're pushed aside. Now what happens to 1? It gets larger. How long can you sustain quadrant 1 lifestyle? Doesn't it soon beat you up? Doesn't it burn you out eventually? How many have felt burned out by quadrant 1? Managing fires, the pounding surf, mending fences. Eventually it takes its toll on your body, on your mind. But then the dilemma is faced. Where do you get time for quadrant 2? When you're inundated by quadrant 1 things that are both important and urgent. You neglect quadrants 3 and 4. You literally say no. 4 isn't difficult. One of the reasons people move to 4 is because they are so beat up by 1. So 4 is essentially wasted anyway. Then the key is to take it from 3. Those things that are pressing, sometimes even popular, proximate, right in front of you, but not important. To say no to them. Goethe taught, things which matter most must never be at the mercy of things which matter least. You can do this kind of work, this quadrant 2 work, when there is a burning yes inside you about the mission and the purpose and the value system. You can say no to all kinds of unimportant, however urgent other things may be. People will begin to see you differently. They won't just come and throw quadrant 3 things to you all the time, like I did one time to one of the managers who reported to me. Yeah, it's really urgent, but it was obviously quadrant 3 from his point of view. He said, sure, I'll work on it if you want. Pulled down his project board. I saw all the projects, deadline dates, how far he'd gone. I realized I'm dealing with someone who has purpose and organization here. I'm not going to mess up this person's life and get involved in reordering this system. So I said, well, I'll find somebody else, and I threw it to another crisis manager. Now, what if it's your boss that gives you a quadrant 3 project? By definition, what does that make it? 1. What is important to another person must be as important to you as the other person is to you. That's why most of you put down on your first things first list your relationships with your loved ones, your family. I know you did. I'll bet there's not an exception in this entire room. There's also not an exception in this room that the things you wrote down under the last two questions are all quadrant 2. Preparation, prevention, values clarification, planning, relationship building, true recreation, or empowerment. Now notice, all of those have to do with relationships, either with self or preparing toward future relationships or the rebuilding of relationships. All 7 habits are in quadrant 2. All 7 of them. Habit 1, to be proactive. You have to be proactive to act on quadrant 2. Why? Quadrants 1 and 3, what? Act on you. So you just react to them. You have to be proactive to act on quadrant 2. Habit 2, begin with the end in mind. Why would that be quadrant 2? It's not urgent to develop a mission statement or a clear sense of what this day, this week, this month, or these goals under each role is, see? Nothing's pressing me to do that. You are proacting the writing of those programs. Habit 3 is where quadrant 2 is taught. Habits 4, 5, and 6 is the process of involving other people in a communication process in moving toward synergistically solving problems. That means come up with solutions that are better. And habit 7, sharpening the saws, the renewal habit, obviously, is quadrant 2 activity. Seriously, people that start to think in quadrant 2 ways will gradually change their job, their environment. Now they have to be wise and sensitive, but they're proactive. They're doing things to make things happen. They have become a force of nature. That's quadrant 2 thinking. Let's go through the 6 steps. Step number 1, connect to your mission. In other words, connect to your overall philosophy, your sense of what your life is about, your vision for your life, and how you see yourself, the kind of contribution, the kind of character, and the value system, hopefully centered upon principles. You connect to that first. Everything gets connected to that. You see, habit 2, begin with the end in mind, is the habit of personal leadership. It basically means to get a clear sense of what your life is about. Habit 3, you manage according to that leadership, according to that mission statement. That's why the first activity that you do is to connect to your mission. That's where you have the burning yes about what your life is about that gives you the courage to say no to quadrants 3 and 4. Particularly 3, because there's so much social value system driving quadrant 3. And it takes an enormous amount of courage. That's why you always want to review and connect to your mission. The very next step that you go into outlines your whole life around roles, which basically means relationships. Study the roles that you have in your life. Study what you put down. You probably put down the roles having to do with your family, the key roles that you have in your work. You may be a department head, you may be a manager, you may be a technician in a particular engineering department, you may be a member of an executive committee, you may be a CEO, but you also want to think about your social roles, your community roles. Notice that's the second activity. Then you'll notice you set up your goals around each of those roles. Quadrant 2. Quadrant 2. When you set up your roles and goals, you're identifying quadrant 2. Then you organize weekly. Why weekly? Why not daily? If you're into daily, what quadrant are you in? By definition, you're into quadrant 1. Because if you organize on a daily basis, you're dealing with the urgencies. The smallest unit of planning would be a week. And then you have to adapt on a daily basis, even on an hourly basis. On what basis do you adapt? On the basis of integrity. If you have educated your conscience into principles, you will have the inward sense. You'll adapt instantly. Your scheduling is very soft. You're very hard on being principle-centered, but your scheduling is soft. And people know it, and they respect it. And they will respect your time. You exercise integrity in the moment of choice, and then you evaluate. You stand back, reflect. How's it going? Roles, goals, execute around them. I go through the 6 steps. Connect to the mission, review roles, select goals, organize on a weekly basis, use integrity in the moment of choice, evaluate. Organize the whole week within the context of a longer-term plan, within the context of the mission. This is essentially the whole week. I can relax now because I know when I'm going to have my private date with my daughter, Jenny, this week. I know when I'm going to exercise. I know when I'm going to have an opportunity to go with my wife on this little Honda trail cycle that we go on almost every day of our life that I'm home, because I've scheduled it. If something more important comes up, that's fine, but I try to put the big rocks in first. I put the mission statement at the top, and then I just put the different roles. Then your life is balanced. See, most time management approaches teach prioritization. That's good. But what about balance? You don't want to prioritize yourself up a ladder of success leaning against the wrong wall. And you don't want to focus on schedules. It's on relationships. So all the roles involve relationships. And it's very personal. First role is the relationship to deity. It's my first and highest priority. Second, family. Third, neighbor in the large sense. I want to contribute in significant ways where there is nothing in it except that kind of service. And I'm sure many of you do. So any church work, any community service, citizenship work, and good causes would be under neighbor. Then chairman. Chairman of a company, so I'm interested in preparing for our board of directors meeting. So I set down the goal of what kind of preparation so that we can make sure that material is sent out in time for people to prepare. Then I have writer, and then as a role as a friend. The point is, you organize around every role that you have, and you look on them as stewardships.